take the nonconformist oath. I promise to be different. I promise to be unique. I promise not to repeat things other people say.
And welcome back to Positive Blatherings. That's a little bit different today because I have a remote guest, so I'm kind of in the back room where people don't usually get to see. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. With me today is KL Wells, and it's kind of an interesting story where I got an email and they said, "Hey, would you like to talk to KL?" And I said, "Who is that?" And then I looked and I said, "Of course." KL, welcome.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. This is great.
VoicesEncourage.com is your website and your organization. Mm-hmm. And normally with my blatherings, I don't do any prep work because, to be honest, most of the people that I talk to, I already know in some way. Mm-hmm. So when I'm speaking with someone I don't know, it's a little bit more of a challenge. So I did kind of have to poke around at your website and stuff and see, just a little bit about what you're working on and stuff like that. But I celebrated 3 years of sobriety yesterday.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And I was just looking at my my podcast, and one of the ones that just came up, it was like, the title was 6 months of sobriety and what I've learned so far. So it's kind of cool to look back at those and go, now I'm at 3 years, you know? Mm-hmm. So that's generally one of the realms that you work in, right? Is addiction, recovery, and that kind of thing.
Yes. We're providing services for the loved ones because I am a loved one, and I had to cobble together the resources that would serve me. And I thought, wow, are you serious at this stage in what's happening? I consider the addiction, alcoholism, all the isms, we're at pandemic levels, and I shouldn't have to work that hard to find the resources that I needed. So, yeah. That's,
speaking from experience, I know what my wife went through. Mm-hmm. She's a go-getter. She'll go. I mean, she's the kind of person you drop her in the desert with a pocket knife and a pack of gum and she'll survive. She'll MacGyver it.
That's awesome.
But that's what she did. And at that point, really the only thing there was Al-Anon. That was the only kind of support. And she went there and it really didn't work for her.
That was my story too.
Yeah. And so I wish, how long have you had Voices Encourage? How long has it been a thing?
We officially launched last November, but we've been working on it for, I think, 15, 16 months. And, honestly, Scott, Voices Encourage has been born out of the pain of my journey with my son. And so I did, who knew, 4 years ago, when I watched him be arrested, that because of those experiences, Voices Encourage would become a thing. Yeah.
So before you got to Voices Encourage, what were you working on? What was your background? What field were you in?
Well, I had spent 25 years consulting with nonprofit organizations. And then I actually moved to Eugene, Oregon, met somebody online, found love and moved, and got here. And at the level that I was at, I would have had to kind of find the needle in the haystack. So I thought, okay, I'm going to enter this community with the question of how can I bring my gifts and talents and be of service here? And so, previously I headed networking. I'm an introvert by nature. And so I crafted a strategy for myself and started working it. And one thing led to the other. And so then I started coaching and training people on how to strategically network, which led to business coaching and consulting. And so I have a thriving practice in business coaching and consulting right now. And Voices Encourage is my passion project.
From an introvert That's an amazing story, because I battle with the introvert extrovert dichotomy all the time, because I have to force myself to come out of my shell. Once I'm out, I think I'm okay, but I really and I can talk myself into not coming out too.
Yes.
I'll get that feeling and I'll be like, you know what? I got to get out of this. I got to figure out something has to happen.
Right.
And so tell me how you did that. What steps did you take in order to make that transformation?
Well, I think, for me, the motivating reason why was catalytic. And I knew one person when I got here, and that was my wife. And she's a teacher. And that was not helpful. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, so I need to meet people in this community. And so I sat down and created a strategy for myself. I thought, okay, in 90 days, and I can stick to 90 days, I can go to a bunch of networking events and then do a bunch of one-to-ones. So I sat down and actually thought through the questions of who inspires me and who do I hold in high regard. I made a list of all these people. And then I unpacked the qualities and characteristics of those people, because I'm like, okay, I want to be finding extraordinary people, but I need to know what are the qualities and characteristics that reside within what I would consider extraordinary. So I made a list, and then I started doing the research. What were the networking events I could go to? And I had a series of 3 questions. I would spend roughly 5 to 7 minutes with a person if I met them. Ask them a couple questions that would determine in my mind whether I wanted to initiate having a coffee with them to continue the conversation. So in the first 90 days, I did 55 one-to-one conversations and 35 networking events. Wow.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. So when you talk about you have your questions, you go in. Is this at one of those speed networking events or something?
No, no. I would just go to the regular. Eugene is rich with networking opportunities, and so I just looked up what was available and just started going. And so I would get there, depending on the venue. These are easy questions. It's generally I would ask people, so are you from here, or did you move here? And depending on what the answer was, then I would follow the thread. And then I would say, what do you love about living here? Because I'm brand new. And then I could figure out based on, how they showed up and how they engaged with me and their answers, whether these were people that I potentially would want to sit down and have coffee with. So if they told me what they did professionally, then I would say, well, what do you love about what you do? Or how did you come to, doing this? And those questions are fairly revealing, and not, I guess, asked enough. So I learned a lot about a lot of different people, and pretty much everybody I asked to go to coffee with me said yes. And then literally I showed up with a typed written list of questions that I wanted to ask them because I was brand new to the community. So I was kind of interviewing them and found out a lot about who they were and what this community was and whether I wanted to, again, continue with the next conversation and the next conversation. And so it was a really interesting process. And what I found to be true was most people were so intrigued by what I was doing. They were like, will you teach me how to do this? and because a lot of people are introverts. Yeah. And they don't like networking because they don't have a reason other than I'm going to get business. And that's usually never compelling enough for an introvert. You know that you should be networking to meet people, but you have to square it up with actually who you are. Yeah. And so, I squared it up with wanting to be of service to my new community, and because that's who I am. And so I knew that I was going to be meeting potentially people that would help me figure out how to really be of service and create whatever I was going to create. I didn't know going in that I would end up, quote, business coaching and consulting, but that's eventually what everything led to. So, yeah,
that's a tremendous story. Do you consider yourself a super organized person, detail oriented?
No.
Interesting. That's wild.
Yeah, no, I am a strategist,
Okay.
And if you give me a strategy that marries up with my values and the core of who I am, then I can execute. And I'm curious enough about people. They fascinate me that I can hang in there for networking for about 45 minutes. And then I'm just energetically winding down and it's time for me to go. So, and then the one-on-ones are much easier for me than the group things. So you can kind of see how, I was creating a big funnel of people. And then I was winnowing it down to people who actually I thought, okay, these are my peeps. These are people that I can feel lifted up from, and I can support, and I can figure out how to serve. So
that's I'm really amazed by that story. Just coming from the introvert, I have the same problem here I have my own business. It's just me here for the most part, and I've been, especially the last 2 years with the pandemic, it's like everybody's kind of had to try to reinvent themselves in some way, or some people haven't, but it's really hard to do. And to go out and find new clients, find new prospects, customers, all that kind of thing is because I'm the wizard behind the curtain. Like I said earlier, you give me all this stuff and I'll make it work and make it look good and sound good and stuff. But, and if someone comes in the door and they say, tell me about your place here, I'll sell them. But I can't go out seeking. I can't go out and say, hey, hi, how you doing? But I like your approach because it's really, and this goes back to what my wife has always talked about. Kelly always told me, why people love her so much, because she's always asking them questions about themselves.
Yes, exactly. Yes. People don't get the opportunity.
And most people go in and they talk about themselves. And I think as much as I don't want to admit it, I think I do often do that, and I'll catch myself, and I'll have to be like, all right, so tell me more about. But I like your approach. It's very basic, but it really gets to the heart of the person.
Yeah. Yes, and that's the truth about it, Scott. Is most people think that they need to be interesting instead of interested. And so I wanted to be interested in who I was meeting first and foremost, because honestly, at that point, I didn't have a business. I was just brand new to this community. I didn't, quote, have anything to sell, thank God, because I didn't go to those events or those conversations thinking I needed to sell them anything other than a genuine curiosity in who they were and a real authentic, genuine desire to serve the community. And so out of that space, boy, doors just kind of opened up for me. And all of my business at this point is by referral. I've never had to do a cold call. So.
And do you think that it's your sort of attraction to charity that is the reason for that? Like, I feel like for those that give back, for those that want to help, it always seems like, it's the idea of karma and things coming back at you tenfold or whatever you believe. Do you feel like it's your authentic desire to want to help people is what draws people to you?
That's a really good question. I think once they get to know me a little bit more, they get that that's totally real. That it's not just kind of a shtick to
a sales pitch.
Yes. And I think people on the front end were just intrigued by how I worked a room. And the questions that I asked is most people weren't asking them. And most people, you go to a networking event and somebody says, what do you do?
Yeah.
And my first question was, are you from here or did you move here? And then what do you love about living here? And those were not the questions that people were getting asked. And most people don't get the opportunity to talk about why they love living here. What do they love to do in their free time? And those were the kinds of questions I was asking them because, I'm an outdoors person And I wanted to find people who loved doing outdoor things also. And I was coming at it more from like a human being perspective than I was from a sales perspective. And people hate to be sold.
Oh yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's that's why I really shy away from the networking events. But I think you've kind of gotten me excited to try your approach because, well, for one thing, in Rochester, New York, most people, if you say, "Why do you love living here?" they'll be like, "Who said I love living here?" Who told you that?
Yeah.
But I was raised in South Florida and moved up here because my wife's from here, and I was honestly getting fed up with the population boom of South Florida. It was impossible to buy a house at a reasonable price.
Right.
You know, all these different things, and we had 3 young children that we had to raise, and we're like. And I had lived up in Rochester with her for a short time, and I was like, I really loved it. You know, and yeah, right now it's 10 degrees or whatever. It's ridiculously cold, but the sun's out.
Yeah, which is great.
If the sun's out, I'm fine. It could be minus 20. I'm fine if the sun's out.
Right.
Fine-ish, I should say, for minus 20. But I absolutely love it here. For so many reasons, mostly probably because of where I grew up and what I was used to with the heat and hurricanes and big lizards the size of my car, things like that we don't have to experience here.
Right.
But I have found that there are asking that question of why do you love living here, I think is you'll either get people either love it or hate it because we have a big problem with retention here after the people graduate from college. They take off. Right. But they're starting to there's a big photonics industry here that's growing and there's more jobs, so it's kind of a growing area, but I really like that. You've gotten me kind of excited to try it, to try to go to a networking event and see how I do.
Well, here's the thing is I would pace yourself. This is what I found to be true for me as an introvert is I would spend 5 or 7 minutes with somebody, enough to ask them questions to understand, do I want to go to coffee with them? And then I would move to the next person. And if I would talk to like 3 to 5 people, and then I was done. I was out. I wasn't going to just stick around because you know how the energy drain takes place. And then I wanted to be the best version of myself when I was doing these events. And the other thing that I want to say, because this is my coach trainer piece, is asking the question, what do you love about living here is very different than what do you like about living here. And I wanted to tap into what people loved about living here. And quite honestly, if people said to me, I don't really have anything that I love about living here, then very quickly I was transitioning to another person because that's not the people that I want to hang out with.
Walk me through how you do that, please. How do you transition away from, do you just cut it short and be like, all right, well, it was nice meeting you, and then just move on? Yeah,
it was. Yes, absolutely. Within, a couple minutes, then I say, I'm here to meet some more people, and it's been delightful talking to you, and I really appreciate your time. And so I'm going to, move on to see about meeting some other people.
Wow. See, I really have, I have trouble doing that.
It's a practice skill.
Yeah.
That's all it is. And so that's what I would say is everything is a skill set in my world. And just setting an intention on my part was I was clear about why I was there. I was clear about what I was going to do. I was clear. And I just executed. And don't get me wrong. The first networking event that I went to, the second one, the third one, I was still nervous.
Yeah.
But what I realized really quickly was people suck at this, and they really don't like it. And so I was kind of this breath of fresh air that fortunately attracted some of the people that I am still friends with and consider my tribe. So
I imagine you as the duck on a pond analogy, where on top it's nice and smooth, but down below it's like, those little legs are kicking.
Right. Yeah.
How far back can you think of when you applied this sort of setting intentions, that idea of setting intentions, how far back does that go in your life?
Oh, wow. I'd say preteen.
Really?
Yeah.
So
I grew
at
up
a
in a
young
really
age, you
dysfunctional family, and I knew it. And I was like, okay, so there has to be a better way. So I honestly, at that point, my mom was a reader and she would take us to the library. And so I started getting autobiographies. And that was very intentional on my part. I wanted to learn how successful, thriving, happy people do life differently than what I was growing up with. And so I think, I've been intentional without really knowing it for a long, long time. And I think within the last maybe 10 to 15 years, understood my intentionality in the things that I had been doing most of my life.
That's amazing. That's truly amazing. I only in the last, 5 years have I really. So when I started this podcast in 2017 or so, the whole point was to be around. It was kind of like my own sort of way of networking, right? Because I wanted to meet people who I respected, who I thought were successful in what they were doing. And, it sort of helped me learn what success really means, because I think as a society, we're kind of, that definition of success is a little muddled. It's more based on
money, power, and things.
Yeah. Whereas as I start to know now that success really is centered around joy and happiness with yourself and with your life, So that's why I started this, was to be able to speak to people in a way where I could kind of learn from them, but also to be a better listener.
Wow, good for you.
That's why I don't like to do too much research, because I'll have an agenda, and I don't want to have an agenda when I have these conversations.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I love the whole organic nature of this conversation and conversations in general. That's why, when I was networking, I only had like 3 questions I would ask, and then I would just follow the organic nature of wherever the conversation took us, if there was somebody that I wanted to continue talking to. And I think I love the fact that, part of your intention in this was to learn to listen better, because that is a massive skill set that we are sorely lacking in our culture.
And it's hard. I'm practicing all the time, and I still find myself not listening. And I don't know if that's just from years of not listening and that becoming my habit. I think so. I think that's what it is. But I do want to talk more about Voices in Courage, and talk about what you offer people and everything like that. Can you walk us through your whole organization?
Absolutely. We started last November in terms of opening it up to the world, so to speak. And we spent a year, and we're still doing it. It's a work in progress. Absolutely. But I wanted to be able to give people resources, the loved ones resources that I had to cobble together myself when I realized that my son was addicted to drugs. And so it has a whole resource component to it, list of books and videos, and, educate yourself is a big component to this. And then we've done a ton of interviews with people on both sides of the equation, people who are recovering addicts, and then other loved ones, and how they've learned to navigate their being a mom or a sister or a wife or a brother or a dad of somebody that they love who is dealing with the disease of alcoholism or addiction. So a lot of interviews. We do 3 times a month coaching calls to address what things are most up for people right now. This is a big relapse time of year. So talking about emotions and self-care and how to create community that is supportive. The other piece to this that I think is vitally important, which is so important to me, is to have a safe community. So we have the website, which has resources and some of my podcasts and information. And then we also have a membership site, which is a pay for that people can go to. And that pay for membership site is a safe community where people can be. They can either, be in the background with whatever they're comfortable with and pick up a lot of information that they need without having really to engage with anybody, or they can fully engage with the community and us and all that's important to them in terms of them figuring out how to, what I think considered usually kind of go through the crisis, the struggling, the surviving, and then the thriving. And that was a big distinction that I found that I was, again, intentional about. Was a lot of people talk about surviving. And I'm like, well, what about thriving?
Yeah.
So I wanted to thrive even in the midst of this disease with my son, because the rest of my life is fantastic. I love my wife. I love my friends. I love my work. I have all these, big bubbles that are fantastic. And then we have the bubble with my son. And so that's what I would say.
I think the thriving part is so key because everybody overlooks that. It's all about survival. It's all about getting by. It's all about like getting, and I get that you have to start there. But having that goal to thrive is huge. I don't think enough people actually that's even in their radar,
I would agree with you. The people that work with me, I tell them from the very beginning that business for me is just a vehicle to create an inspired life. And so I'm living an inspired life. And most of the time, that's what I'm working with my clients on, is helping them get back to the center of who they really are, in terms of joy and happiness and being excited to get up every day and understanding their business is just one part of their life. And if you craft your business in such a way that it is joyful and exciting, and you have great people that you're working with, and you get to do the thing that is the best expression of who you are, I don't know that it gets much better than that. So,
amen. I agree 100%. I mean, that was the reason why we started RockVox. I was working in radio and just sort of, I was freelancing for another person, and all the right things happened. So I was able to start this business, and then the pandemic sort of forced me out of radio. So I was like, well, I guess this is it. It's sink or swim now, because it was just a side job.
Right.
It was a side thing, and I had the other job. But now it was like, all right, well, this is it. Sink or swim. Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, So I think, Scott, that comes out of a place that is kind of embedded in my thinking, is that pain pushes until vision pulls. And so you have the pain of the pandemic. And so out of that pain, it's like, okay, well, what is this meant to serve in terms of this next elevation of who I am and what I'm meant to bring to the world? And so you took the kind of closing down of radio and then transformed it into a way that you could still use that medium in a different way to be an expression of the best of who you are.
There are just a ton of little nuggets of just beautiful nuggets that you're imparting today. The stigma of alcoholism, addiction, and stuff. How much does that come into the community on Voices in Courage? Do you have programs for that to help with that?
Absolutely.
To help change the stigma?
Yeah. Most definitely. I mean, I do think this part of the center of what we're doing is to shatter the stigma, to shatter the shame, to shatter the judgment. And most people kind of, I believe, whether you're a loved one or whether you're an addict or an alcoholic, you're kind of surrounded and steeped in the shame, the stigma, the judgment, the guilt, all the things. And all of that keeps us sick and does not help support us in our own healing and our own transformation. And so we have to shatter those things. And Voices in Courage is absolutely grounded in the notion that we need to get back to being graceful with each other and kind and compassionate and understand we're all human, and drop the stigma, the judgment, the shame, the guilt,
I know.
all the things. And what I have found in this journey is, I mean, if you go to some of my other podcasts or you're within the membership site, you will see me talk about things that are raw and real right now. And I get emotional. I mean, my son right now is in relapse. And so we did a segment of me talking about having spent a couple hours with him face to face a week ago. And I was very raw and real about the whole experience, because I want people to have permission to feel and be present in their own experience through this. And only by doing that can we walk our walk through this and get to the other side.
Yeah, you're doing some very important work, and I've been fortunate enough to meet people like yourself. We had an organization here that was doing a podcast very similar. It was called 100 Proof Living, and they tackled all these subjects. And so I've had people. It's just amazing how it works. I've had people in my life that have sort of been indirectly guiding me. These aren't people that I get a call from every day that say, "Hey, what are you doing? How's it going?"
Right.
But I, through social media and just being in their sphere and in my sphere, is, seeing what's going on and the paths, and it's just, I feel so blessed, and getting to speak to you and learn about Voices in Courage today is another, one of those miracles that I'm so happy to experience. I mean, so we were supposed to do this, last month or something like that.
Yes.
And I had to reschedule because I had something going on with my daughter, I believe. And here we are picking this up, and it's the day after my 3-year sober anniversary.
Which, see, things show up for a reason.
And it's just amazing to me. There's sometimes where I get up and, going through my day, and you just have to sit back and laugh and go, what?
Right. Yeah.
How your daily routine, staying on track, staying positive, staying, smiling when you're in the midst of grief or whatever it is you're in the midst of that's negative. Do you have a go-to? Do you have something that you brings you back and that can?
Well, I have a fairly rigorous, what I call an energy management plan. So self-care has always been really important to me. And what I realized, certainly going through this experience with my son, when things started to really fall apart, one of the first things that went through my head was, okay, I got to up my self-care. And so I am routinely up, like this morning, because of this podcast, I was up at 4:00 this morning. I get up, I do my thing, and then I go get a workout. And my workouts are sacrosanct. They're non-negotiable. I've been doing this for years. And so that starts my day. I eat a really good breakfast. I visit with my wife. So we have time in the morning before I start, which is what happened before I got on with you. And throughout the day, I make sure I get great sleep at night, and I eat well, and I exercise. I spend some time outside in nature. I have skills in terms of, like you said, even with my son in relapse right now, I'm able to shift myself pretty quickly if I start to feel like I'm worrying about him, which is a failed strategy to begin with, because what we focus on, we get more of. And I just don't want to give that. I don't want to give the possibilities of him dying or, going to jail again or, all the things. I don't want to give it any energy. So I can pretty quickly shift myself. And again, that's a skill set that I've developed and worked with for years, and I coach and train on right now. So yes, I would say those are the main grounding points for me. I do every morning listen to a podcast on the way to and from the gym that is uplifting and life-giving for me. So those are the main pieces, I think.
You seem to be one of those people that fits 36 hours into 24 somehow. But I think, would you say that your devotion to discipline helps feed your joy?
No, I would say that my joy serves the discipline.
Okay.
I would flip it, because my reason for being at this point in time, like Voices Encourage has been born out of like the worst moments of my life. So that whole notion of pain, when you get cracked wide open in a way that you did not know you could feel and experience. And I leaned into that pain, knowing full well that it was in service of a higher version of myself and a vision for service. And so it's the vision for service for all these people that are out there that don't know how to put the next foot in front of them, the next foot down and the next foot down and the next foot down in dealing with their loved one who is dealing with addiction or alcoholism. And I am absolutely compelled to show up to deliver this to the world. And so my quote discipline of self-care is really driven by that vision of my own service.
Yeah, see, I saw it backwards. I saw it like you stick to your routine, you stick to all these things because you know that this is what works for you, and therefore you get to this place. But I like that. I was thinking about it backwards, but that's very interesting. So what's in the future for Voices Encourage and for you and your family? Like what's going on 5 years from now? What do you think?
Oh, 5 years from now. 5 years from now, I think we'll have thousands of members that have joined the Voices Encourage community. And we will be continuing to create the dent in the universe that is shifting. Really, the way that I see it is we live in a power over and control of world. And Voices Encourage in the work that I do is really about getting back to soul honoring or spirit honoring. And so I see us beginning to shatter and continuing to shatter the shame, the judgment, the guilt, all that's wrapped up in this disease, and getting people back to grace and humanity and honoring and being empathetic with each other. So I see my son running his own business and serving others who have been through the disease that he's dealing with right now. So I see him happy. I surround myself with the happy pictures of him through the years to keep me focused on that bright light, amazing young man that I happen to call my son. And I will have done a TED Talk by then. We're starting our own podcast this quarter. We will have launched it by the first, April 1st.
Hey,
yeah. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's my business anniversary too, April 1st.
Oh, sweet. That's great.
4 years, April 1st.
That's great. Yeah. So lots up and
congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. And paying attention, like you said, organic conversations, paying attention to what our community is asking for and creating from out of that space.
I really got a lot out of when you talked about not giving energy to the negativity, like not worrying too much. Do you find that really a challenge?
Sure. Yes.
Have you gotten to yourself where you really have kind of a routine where you can work through it easier than at first? Like you said before, everything you've kind of built, over the years, you've built to that.
Well, again, it's a skill set. That's
what I was trying to say.
Absolutely. And I mean, the three major pieces that are really important from a tools perspective is when I'm aware that I'm worrying or I'm giving energy to a thought that is really negative that I don't have any reason. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, it hasn't happened and I don't want to make that happen, actually. I am aware that that's what I'm doing. And then if I can, I shift my physicality because changing your energy and your physicality shifts how you feel and how you show up. And then I flip the thought to what I am most grateful for and the gifts and lessons embedded in this experience for me. And then I speak about that. And, or if I can't speak about it, I will write about it. So it's a pretty quick process at this point. And the first thing is just awareness. And so I have shortened the process and shortened the process and shortened the process the more I've practiced the skills.
Yeah. Wow. I've really enjoyed this time with you. I'm so grateful that I was able to connect with you and record this podcast. How do best way people get in touch with you is voicesencourage.com?
Go to voicesencourage.com and you have an opportunity to reach out to all of us. We have a whole team and I think this is another thing that's really kind of fun is my entire team are contractors. And most of them I've never met in person.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and I think that's been one of the beauties, that's one of the benefits, beauties, amazing things that's come out of COVID is it took down some walls that we had created about what business looks like, sounds like, and feels like.
Yeah. I think that was an amazing thing, although it was a little bit, it kind of pushed my business around a little bit, shoved it around like, come on, man, because I think a lot of people that normally would have hired me to do something have figured out how to do it themselves. Although some of them are still like, I don't want to deal with all this stuff, you do it. But I think that's definitely the one positive thing that has come out of the pandemic and the idea that business can take place. People can work from home and be productive, and it's showing to be more productive than when they're going to the office, and that's so important for families and everything. It's definitely a blessing. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time this morning and getting up at 4:00 in the morning to be on my podcast. It's really been a pleasure. I've really gotten a lot out of this conversation. Oh, thank you so much, Scott. This has been delightful. I would love to have you on our podcast when we're up and running. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And if there's anything that I can do to help Voices Encourage and anything like that, please, don't hesitate to call on me. I will reach back out. Absolutely. All right. Well, best of luck with you and your son and your family and Voices Encourage. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Well, I am just absolutely amazed about that podcast recording. It was really inspiring. I learned a lot, and it was a complete chance encounter. She is trying to grow. KL is trying to grow her organization and trying to get the word out, and somebody reached out on her behalf to see if, which I'm grateful that they even thought that coming on the Positive Blatherings podcast would be even remotely good for them. So I appreciate that. I'm very grateful. And voicesencourage.com if you want to reach out to KL, and if you need their services, if you have a family member that's dealing with addiction or alcoholism, please reach out, because from what I can tell, they really have the resources, and those resources are hard to find. So thank you so much, KL, for all of that. You're listening to the Positive Blatherings podcast, and there's a whole slew of conversations that I've had for the last couple of years. If you haven't already listened to them, many of them dealing with addiction and recovery, and all of them dealing with success and positivity. So give it a listen, and you can please give me a rating on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. It really helps, and I need all the help I could get.